Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the OpenCrowbar design meeting of October 1st, 2014. As we do every other week, we try to drill down deep into OpenCrowbar design issues and considerations and share some code and do small updates on where we're going with the product features in particular. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add before we dive into the agenda? Today we're covering the work that's almost done in Chef Metal Crowbar to allow driving hardware directly from Chef. Rob wants to talk about OpenStack and Open vSwitch versus ML3, which has something to do with contrails. We'll learn more from him. Greg, if he joins us, will give us an update on what's going on with SaltStack. He'll give us the details. Rob and Victor can probably fill in for him. I'll be enlightening you all with the big changes coming down the pike for Puppet 4.0 and the various things I learned in conversation with folks at PuppetConf last week. PuppetConf was really well run, and I recommend it. It's going to be in Portland next year, which is a lot more manageable for many folks than San Francisco. A lot easier on the wallet. And finally, a review of our OpenCrowbar roadmap will be the last thing in our agenda for today. So I'll kick it off with Chef Metal Crowbar. It's going.
No, nothing. Something else. Not. I should have muted.
The Chef Metal Crowbar is just about done. Good time for anybody who's interested to jump in and eviscerate my code. It's Ruby that looks like Perl, which is probably a bad thing. I'll be spending some time getting the attention of the Chef folks to do a walkthrough of it, hopefully in the middle of next week, if not earlier. I'm connecting to nodes. It's bringing up nodes and moving them to their proper deployments and ensuring that OSs are installed, and then going through the beginning the Chef takeover of the node that we've just provisioned. There's some funny realities about Crowbar that have made my work easier than I imagined. Deceptively easier. It turns out that if you're running Chef Metal and Crowbar on the same node, you don't need to do any SSH key setup because Chef Metal, when run as the Crowbar user, or the user who has rights to Crowbar, their SSH keys are already put on all the slave nodes. So you don't need to distribute any keys because the keys are already there on the box. So I'm just at the point where I'm debugging the actual SSH connection, ensuring that the right IP addresses are actually being used, and the timeouts seem a little short. The SSH timeouts by default in Chef Metal seem a little short to me. I was getting a failure, and I'm going to loop back around and see what's the holdup there. It might be some networking issues, but I feel like I'm just about there. And Chef Metal examines the Chef client on the slave node to ensure it's the version that it likes. It will go ahead and upgrade it if it can. Excited to see how Chef Metal takes care of all that stuff. That's just about where we are.
With the version of the client that we're using, or the client's backwards compatible?
In most cases, it's backwards compatible. You can set in your Chef Metal recipes which version of Chef Client you want to be on the node, and Chef Metal will make it so. Chef Metal should run in any Chef 11.8 or higher, or 11.11 or higher. That's on the Chef Metal.
Yeah, and I think we're throwing 11.12 on all of our things.
Going to put 12?
I think we're throwing the 11.12.
11.12. Okay.
Yeah. We haven't moved to Chef 12 yet, and I don't have any real plans to.
Well, the good thing about Chef 12 is that you get all the enterprisey features. Because as far as I understand, it is just Chef Enterprise.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're not using them yet, then
Yeah. No reason to complicate. And that's all I got. Love my development environment. I've added a lot of great tools into Vim that make it super easy to develop. And that's it. Hopefully a demo next week. I can give a simple demo right now, which leads up to that SSH failure, but I'd like to be able to go all the way to maybe even a Chef client upgrade, or at least registering with the Chef server to give control of the node. So hopefully next week there'll be a nice demo. And if I get it all done and recorded, then I'll drop a link to a demo video and docs on how to get it running. Any other questions? With that?
be interesting to see the demo.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It all happens so fast. I might have to put it in slow motion.
We can do the
bionic
man. We can do the bionic man sounds where you Bruce Jenner.
I'll just throw a bunch of random sleep 100s.
I like that. I think the bionic man sounds better. You can leap over buildings. $6 million man. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. With inflation, I think he's the $600 million man.
All right. We're gonna do raid and bios first. I'm just prepping some.
It looks like Greg is going to jump in here in a sec.
Oh, is he? Awesome.
I just gave him the link to OpenCrowbar.
Yay.
But yeah, I mean, I can do raid and bios while we're waiting. If you don't want to do your OBS versus open contrails thing first.
I'm pulling together some information about it, and so.
Okay. So Greg went ahead and merged the pull request I had outstanding to add actual RAID configuration functionality to OpenCrowbar. And what that gives us right now is the ability to define and create RAID volumes more or less on the fly while the systems are up. Right now, the model that I'm using, the model that's exposed to everything else is pretty much the same model that we use in Crowbar 1, where there's a specific RAID configure role and the RAID and the layout for a system has to be defined there. I've changed up a little bit about how volumes are actually defined so that they're not all so that you don't have to define them all in one go, however. And next steps are going to be to actually figure out a reasonable API to be able to let the core expose that functionality to everyone else, so that other roles and users can actually create and delete RAID volumes on the fly for systems that support doing that.
At PuppetConf, people, when I was talking about Razor and Crowbar and the differences between them, I asked folks if they would be interested in having first-class Puppet resources of their RAID and BIOS configurations. And after they, with their head tilted to the side, and thought about it for a minute. They said, yeah, why not? So the Puppet people don't have something like Chef Metal already in their toolkit. They're not driving any sort of hardware or cloud stuff from within their Puppet modules. So it was a bit of a stretch for them conceptually, but they seemed quite receptive. And these are folks with big infrastructures.
Well, that sounds promising if, they'll actually help work on the code. I've tried to structure things so that it'd be fairly easy to rip the internals out and plop them in a gem that we can just pull onto systems that need RAID configuration, and expose a little API via the gem that any other code can use to screw around with RAID controllers. And I've also tried to set it up so that the only thing you have to actually have on the target system are the RAID utilities or a method of configuring the RAID controller from it. So the API that I'm exposing should work equally well for people who use Mega CLI, Sapphire CU, whatever other CLI abomination LSI is going to come out with the next generation of RAID controllers, or for people who want to manage their RAIDs using out-of-band methods like using WSMan or for that crazy API that Cisco uses for UCS.
What about soft RAID using the OS to configure the RAID?
The API will work for that too.
Does it already do that, or is that added work?
That's added work.
Okay.
I implemented just enough.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I implemented just enough to work on the hardware that I had, and to actually work on the hardware. Because configuring soft RAID is a lot more flexible than hardware-based RAID is.
I applaud you for not doing not over designing.
Actually, at DevOps days, there was a lot of head nodding when folks were saying that they're no longer ordering RAID cards, and they're just doing JBOD and letting Linux RAID in the kernel handle all their RAID needs.
Well, that's fine as long as you trust your UPSs.
Yeah.
That's fine as long as you trust your UPSs and you trust that and that you trust all your systems and make sure they do all the right disabling and enabling of all the caching layers along the way.
That's what we were doing at NetApp.
Yeah.
We did JBOD and ZFS.
And JBOD plus ZFS is a good way to go for a lot of stuff like that. ZFS is actually even pretty stable on Linux when you're talking mainstream storage, but I don't think we're going to see the demise of the controller anytime soon.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, even if you're doing JBOD, you still have to tell the RAID controller to set it up. So.
Not if you don't have a RAID controller in the system at all. If you're just exposing a bunch of stupid disks to the OS.
Oh, just a whole bunch of SATA drives?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the system set up to enable that many SATA drives? I guess the new motherboards are. Or you can't train them?
I mean, if you take an LSI 9207 base card and plop it in your system, that's what you get by default. A bunch of dumb SATA drives hanging off some expanders.
Yep.
But I see plenty of boards with 4 or more SATA plugs in them. Just soldered right there onto the board.
Yeah, pretty much the main advantage that RAID cards have over soft RAID is RAID cards, or at least the perks, tend to have battery-backed cache or NVRAM-based cache.
Mm-hmm.
So that when the power goes out, you don't lose any writes that were in flight.
Yep. You don't have to worry about it. But
or if Docker panics your kernel you don't lose your disks.
Right.
Because you ran out of room in your Docker. Because you ran out of room in your Docker file store, like happened to me last week.
So, aside from that tangent, I've also been working on the BIOS implementation. Right now, I've been targeting Dell 12-gen stuff, and that is at the point where I can read and write all of the BIOS attributes and schedule update jobs and reboots and reset everything back to factory default. The next thing that I need to do is to be able to set everything up so that I can change the sequence on demand. And I found a neat way of doing that using IPMI instead of WSMan. So I'm probably going to do that instead because honestly, the code that I've seen to do that through WNRI was excessively complicated.
Cool, really great stuff.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it on the RAID and BIOS stuff. I figure after I'm done with that, I'll go back through and actually, the other thing is, along the way, I've been adding documentation to whenever I've been writing the RAID and BIOS code, I've been making sure that it is documented in something that Yard can easily pull developer documentation out of. And I want to go back through and do that for all the core code as well.
Would I find it? Where would I find those docs? In the docs directory?
No, I have not done anything to extract the documentation out yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you go to like OpenCrowbar, hardware, RAID, you won't find it in BIOS yet because I haven't put a pull request for it yet.
I've got it open on the share.
Yeah, RAID, and then Crowbar Engine, Bar Clamp RAID.
Gotcha. Doc?
No, there's. I said there are no separate docs yet. It's all.
Right. Oh, it's all in Yard.
Yeah, but if you go to app and then into the model. And then models, Bar Clamp RAID, and then driver.rb.
Okay, so you've been documenting methods. Excellent. So this should show up in places like I think there's an RDoc. Is it .org? Yeah. No, that's Dog Obedience Club. Although that's very funny.
Besides that, you're talking about. I'm talking about Yard, not RDoc.
But there's an RDoc website that supports it. I'm just spacing out on where it is.
We don't need to worry about it yet.
Yeah.
Once and I think both Jed and I are converging on, Yard is the way to go for documentation.
Oh, it's great.
Writing a couple of scripts that'll just go out and rip out everything.
And we have the agreement. We just haven't done it to take the doc generation code out of the product and just point to that website that Mike was doing. I need to find out what's up with Mike and that.
This is fun stuff. Oh.
It failed.
Got a ticket.
Oh, it's probably not expecting our weird hierarchy.
Yeah.
But there's this. This works. I set this up. You can see the OpenCrowbar core documentation with lots and lots of. I'm sorry to be, rat holing into this or diverging, but you can see there's also so there's all the objects here, all the classes here, and then under files, I've also linked to more useful sort of readmes, especially this one, which is one folks might want to link to. It's actually a link into all the docs files that we have. So not only can you see all the classes and the methods, but from a poorly named file in the file list, you can get into our documentation system and see everything that we got, all the documentation we've written. Linking directly here, well, it would be nice if the links worked. Some of the links do work sometimes. I also added the routes because I was working on understanding our API. And I found this very helpful to just have a quick link to all the code that's expressing the routes.
Wow. Yeah.
It was a little confusing to me initially because some of the routes were under API v2, and some were just under API, and some weren't under anything. And we should perhaps put that on the burn down list to get rid of or forward API requests that don't have a version number. Or do we want to try to implement something like automated versioning? But that's kind of scary.
That sounds like too much itch to scratch right now.
Yeah. Anywho, back to scheduled. If we're done with updating the RAID BIOS, let's talk about OVS, Open vSwitch versus OpenContrails in the ML3 plugin. First of all, what is this?
Jump to the link, please. The bottom one, I think.
For the bottom one? Okay.
All right. I'll keep this up very briefly. So the broader spectrum here is that there's been interest in using OpenCrowbar as a way to set up OpenStack. This is a long-going thing. And using CentOS 7 as the baseline, and then using something like PackStack on top of that. The logical thing, based on our experience, would be to have Crowbar set up Open vSwitch, and then allow PackStack to take advantage of that configuration. Very similar to what SUSE does, things like that. The networking configuration is logically done sort of as part of ready state, and then handed off to the modules or cookbooks that install OpenStack. And so this came through the other day where Rackspace publicly said we're not using Open vSwitch, it's not scaling for us. And they haven't given that many details on what they're doing as an alternative. This thread suggested that ML2, which is a plugin for Neutron, is using OpenContrails. OpenContrails, like Open vSwitch, requires a lot of pre-setup before you can plug Neutron into it. And so I believe that that it's worth putting out to the community. Is there an interest in doing the OpenContrail configuration on the node rather than doing Open vSwitch configuration? It's probably not quite as generic, but OpenContrail seems to be picking up a lot of momentum in the community.
In which community?
OpenStack community.
Do we care?
We only care to the extent to which I have multiple people talking to me about doing OpenStack deployments using Crowbar to ready state the environment. I do not expect the OpenCrowbar team to touch OpenStack. I think that would be like a third rail, to be honest about that. So, but I do think that there are some people doing Chef OpenStack and Puppet OpenStack and Salt OpenStack who would be very interested in us building a network topology out using OVS or OpenContrail that they could just plug into. So
I think that's awfully ambitious for anything near term.
I'm sorry?
I think that is awfully ambitious for anything near term.
It is awfully ambitious. I'm planting seeds, Victor. I'm not asking people to start working. To say there's multiple directions that we could go. I'm looking for feedback. If somebody wanted to fund development for that and encourage, help that move along, this is the place where I would say, hey, OVS seemed obvious, but I'm not sure it is, based on Rackspace's one statement. And so I'm opening it up that we would need more guidance before we started on OVS or an alternate path, if that was the next one we did.
What I'm trying to say is right now, the OpenCrowbar deliberately does not care whether or not you're going to wind up using OpenVSwitch or any other technology.
Yep.
And I don't see why we should start caring in the next 2 to 6 months.
It's not on video.
We would care if there was somebody who showed up and wanted. So I don't think that's part of OpenStack. Actually, this to me is the operative question. I don't think OpenVSwitch or OpenContrails are part of OpenStack. I think they're setups that prep for ready state that OpenStack then leverages.
How often do we see OpenVSwitch or OpenContrails or whatever used outside of the context of OpenStack?
I don't know. Excellent question.
Exactly. That's why I don't care right now.
I'm not asking you to care right now. I understand you don't. You're working on stuff that I consider a higher priority.
It'll be interesting to see folks running PaaS systems like
Cloud Foundry.
Yeah, or OpenShift, what they're using for their network configurations. Now, they're usually pretty straightforward, at least in the OpenShift sense, that it's DNS. DNS is really doing all the hard work for OpenShift.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think you'll find. Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, no one outside of people who are really serious about pushing SDN everywhere, which right now is mainly cloud providers, gives a damn about anything other than just basic Linux networking. So if they're super fancy, they'll demand that everything gets bonded.
Right.
Which is why I do think it's a good idea to track this sort of stuff, but not really to spend too much time thinking about how we can make OpenCrowbar do it.
Yeah, my part of my role is to get things on the table so that if people want to discuss it, we're aware that there are choices coming, not to drive the choice yet. It's a long term. You got to plant the seeds before they grow.
Well, thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
At least keeping an eye on these things is important, because you never know if there's a customer who wants to use Crowbar and they're deploying OpenStack with it, or using it to prepare their systems for OpenStack deployment with PackStack or whatever. We'll also probably be looking at one of these OpenContrail or OpenVSwitch to to get the networking done for them.
That's where my head was.
And some shakeup in the community with a big cloud provider like Rackspace switching off of Open vSwitch is news.
It is, yeah. Cool. That was my topic.
So let's and potentially something we could drive if there was if somebody wanted to volunteer or fund the.
This is entirely from my perspective. We're looking for somebody to fund that work, or for it to be a participatory thing. I think Victor's right. It's not critical path for building out the ready state infrastructure. So it has to.
And that's a good.
We'd only do it to support if somebody wanted it to support an OpenStack workload. I mean, Victor's dead on for that. I completely agree.
But it makes a good segue to SaltStack, which is
that's true.
Totally something, an ecosystem, part of an ecosystem that Crowbar is really intimately involved with. And Greg's been doing a whole bunch of work on. Greg, you free to tell us what you've been up to with SaltStack?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah, well, very well.
Okay, good. I have been learning about SaltStack and how to set up masters and minions. Also spending time relearning OpenCrowbar, or learning OpenCrowbar and all of its nuances, and getting that set up. I currently have in the tree a single master minions set up, so you can add a master to a deployment, and then add minions to it, and it'll join correctly. If you add, assuming you add minions one at a time. I'm working on a fix for that because of a misunderstanding of some of how the functions are working or expected to work. So I'll hope to have that patched shortly. In addition, I've been looking at and learning some of the cluster stuff in OpenCrowbar to see how hard multiple masters would be.
Well, unfortunately, Crowbar by itself won't give you much help there. By the cluster stuff, I assume you're talking about the cluster flag and all of its weird implementation details.
Yeah, I've actually been looking at it and fixing it.
Yeah. Pretty much all the cluster flag acts as is a fence.
As a what?
A fence.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything beyond that. Pretty much all it says is that if there are multiple roles with the same name and the same deployment that have a cluster flag, then all of the parents of those roles have to be active before I'll do any of their children, and all of the children of the cluster roles won't transition to do until all of the cluster roles themselves are active.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's right. Or that seems to be mostly what happens after I've fixed some compile issues with it.
I'm quite certain that there are some bugs in that area.
Yeah, so I'll have a patch for that too. I hope to have a patch for that shortly too.
Victor, you were saying that all parents of cluster roles have to be active, and that allows the children. How do you finish that sentence?
Yes, that sentence was finished.
The key aspect of it is that really the cluster flag just attempts to make sure that all the parents or all the children of the clustered node roles are the same.
Yeah, it makes sure they don't proceed until all the cluster roles themselves are active.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually documented in the role documentation that we have.
Yep. I was starting to write my own features for that, and then I realized that that kind of quasi already existed as a concept.
Yeah.
And so there's some save problems and some just general code problems because it's atrophied that I'll have a patch for.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
What
So
with console, we can extend cluster functionality a lot more if we want to talk about trying to cluster services that don't cluster themselves.
yeah. But for this, there needs to, for SaltStack, they need to have some synchronization among themselves with regard to key management and stuff.
So how does Salt's setup configuration and philosophy of action compare with Chef, for example?
In some regards, I think it's better described as Puppet. It has more of a declarative feel than opposed to some DSL programmatic operations. So Salt follows very much the same kind of paradigm of here's a set of what this node is, and there's not much in the way of programmatic evaluation, which is, like I said, much more of a Puppet. They do have a few more kind of knobs in some regards to let you iterate and a few other things that sounds like have now shown up in Puppet as well. But for the most part, it's very much a here's the codified template for what this should become, and there's not much of the way of actually running code in the context of the client's bring up. Salt works from a master push to clients, and you can push by individual or sets of filtered tags. They have a pull method, but in general, their descriptions are more push-based. They have built-in, or ships with all their tooling, the ability to do tiered deployments. They have the concept of masters through a program or setup they call Syndicate. And so as you choose to deploy things out, the Syndicate module hooks the masters up as clients, and so the main master sees everything, but when it actually goes to manage operations, they get distributed down to downstream masters to actually do the operations to the actual then clients. It appears to be left to the user to deal with formula synchronization. Formula is their term for cookbook or Puppet module or whatever. And then on top of that, they have this pillar concept, a pillar of salt, as you were, which is kind of your customizations for a specific node. So you take a pillar, you give a formula, that goes to a set of nodes, that represents a deployment or a instantiation of a service. So I might take the Apache formula, a pillar that says what I want that Apache to apply, and I give that to tell the master to apply that to a set of nodes, and then that goes off, right?
Okay.
That's the
is a pillar like template data?
Yeah, think of it as in some regards as the
It's
like
file?
it's like the manifest, I guess, in Puppet, or the external classifier manifest that tells you, oh, it's this, these are the IPs, these are the right values for these variables, and then it goes off and does it. In the Chef context, it's kind of like the node attributes or the role attributes.
Or data badge.
Yeah, sure. However you want to pull those, right? However you want to merge those in.
Yeah. Yeah, Chef has no lack of ways to express attributes.
Yeah, exactly. The Salt has the thing called grains. Think of it as oh-hi, or whatever the Puppet version is.
Factor.
Factor. There you go. Thank you. So it's got the same thing where it basically pushes back a set of node data that you can then operate on. Let's see. They do have, in some regards, something that I think is kind of interesting. Formula can be defined as Git repositories directly. So you can, and then the masters know to go and pull and keep those up to date. So now there's a set of life cycle questions of when do you pull, when do you push kind of things, but those are up to the user to how you push them out.
Mm-hmm.
They do have an orchestration tool called Runner. Cloud, combination of thing called Runner and Cloud. These items let you pass in sets of Salt master scripts, basically, that lets you declare a set of formula to bring up in a certain order. And then the cloud part is kind of a back-end driver for trying to manage cloud-like devices. So you could, in theory, bring up a cloud component that then the master knew how to operate on. So they also have a standalone mode as well, so that you can push the appropriate formula into position and then run from a standalone, much like Chef Solo or Puppet without a masterless Puppet.
Puppet apply.
Yeah, there you go. So it's got very much the same semantics. It's written all in Python, and they use AMQP, well, 0MQ in this case, bus to do client pull kind of things, client pull push through the AMQ 0MQ bus. Right now, so with regard to OpenCrowbar, OpenCrowbar does not use this as a jig, or doesn't create a jig for this currently. So there's no way to actually define a bar clamp to then go off and actually run salt formulas and do the injection. It's not too big of a deal to, I mean, it seems like it would be non-trivial, or it'd be fairly straightforward to do attribute injection into a pillar that would then get pushed into, right? All of the tools are there. It's just mapping it and building it. The current salt stack bar clamp is written on top of the script jig. The thought is that one day, if we ever wanted to, we could bootstrap salt stack without Chef or Puppet.
Mm-hmm.
So that then if we ever needed to, not like we ever want to, or salt stack wanted to come back and help build a Chef Puppet free instance of OpenCrowbar, they could at least do it from that basis. I don't think we should, but they could.
while there are quite a few kinks in our current implementation that I'd really love to be able to refactor out, yeah, I don't really see rewriting everything away from Chef at this point.
Yeah, not yet. So.
Well, then we should create our own config management language.
That's obviously the best thing to do.
Let's create yet another one.
That's not a rat hole at all.
And because everybody else has done it so poorly.
If it's not recursive, I don't want to hear about it.
So I guess that's the latest brain dump.
Thanks, Vance. That's really helpful. We got any other folks on the line that want to pick up an agenda item? I could do some quick reviews of what I learned at PuppetConf, and we also have left on the agenda dropping the RPM installs for now, which is kind of a fait accompli, but we do have to update the documentation. And we need to discuss the roadmap. I haven't seen a roadmap.
We're out of time for that. I would suggest we do it next week.
Yeah.
Scott can join us. And yeah, I think it's worth just saying we're not. Let's stop saying we're going to do the RPMs, and if people want to try Crowbar, we're going to drive everybody down the Docker route.
Mhm.
There are a couple of things that we'll need to do to the container to make that feasible as anything other than a limited test kind of thing.
Okay.
But nothing complicated that we haven't done yet because I haven't had a need for it.
Yeah, giving folks a script to I don't know, pull the repo and the image, and then get it booted.
Set up the container so the database is stored outside of Docker.
Yes, that would be good. Or in a separate container.
Whatever.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks so much for your time. It's been really useful and helpful for me, and I hope it has been for you guys.
Very much.
And we'll talk to you all again next week. Have a great week.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Judd.
Good job, Judd.
Bye-bye.
Bye.